Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. This is such an exciting night. Ann Perry back again, and with yet another new project.
This one's been on the back burner for about 7 or 8 years. I've been in America just short of 6 years, and I started long before I left, but I finally made it. Never give up.
We've talked about it several times, in point of fact, when you have been here. And of course, the sad part is that William Monk is on vacation, and possibly the Pitts as well, except for young Daniel, who is carrying on, right?
That is the next thing I have to do when I finish what I'm doing now. I finished the second Elena last night.
Wow.
Well, they need it early. And I'm working on the Christmas novella for next year, which I hope to finish by the end of October. Then it's the next annual. Then it's the third Elena.
She does this to herself. Don't feel sorry for her. I've tried many times to suggest that slowing down might not be a bad idea, but she rejects me.
Well, I don't know when I'm going to hit the buffers. Somebody suggested a few days ago that I'm going to live to be 97. But that'll come terribly soon. You know, where did the last 10 years go to?
I know, I often think of that. However, unlike others of us our age, your hair seems to be thickening while mine is thinning, which I consider to be really unfair.
It's totally unfair. Probably all the hot air inside my head.
I thought about that, that's true. Probably all that brain power is stimulating hair growth. But anyway, Rogaine, beware. So, right, anyway, tell us about Death in Focus, which gives us a clue right away that maybe your heroine has a profession.
She is. She's a photographer. She used to work for the Home Office until she had a very bad lapse of judgment. Oops. Fell in love with somebody totally unsuitable who betrayed her.
Really like things like that. You have employed that in quite a few books, betrayal.
Well, I suppose it's the center of mysteries, of a lot of mysteries. Yeah. But this one portrayed in the good old-fashioned way of betraying the country and betraying her love for him as well.
He was a rotter.
A total rotter. But he's at the center of the second story, and you'll find out what happens to him.
He's going to get his. Aha!
Yes, and she's going to give it him.
But that's the really fun part, isn't it, about writing a series, is that you can set things up to happen later.
Yes, and usually I like to lay the seeds in the book before, because I've got, my American agent and my British agent agreed with him, said the other day, I would like to try for a contract for 6. What? Let's write the outlines for the next 6. You what? Please have it at the end of this month.
So he's really thinking that you will live to 97.
Yes. Or else you just can't count. I wouldn't be betting.
Well, I thought that one of the fun parts about the opening of Death in Focus is it reminds me of Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train.
Oh, does it?
Of course it does, don't you think? You have two people on a train journey, and then there's a mysterious thing that happens to one, and the other has to carry on. I mean, come on.
Yes, it does. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right.
She hadn't thought of it. See, I thought she just stole it.
I just arrived at the same place because I wanted her to have an understandable and believable reason for doing what she did. And found it very difficult to do. Not easy as if she were well practiced.
Well, basically you're starting out with an untested heroine, and you have to put her in a terrible position in order to find out what she's made of, right?
Exactly right, yes.
And her family background plays an important role in this.
Very important indeed, and I've given her 2 members of my family. I've given her my father as a grandfather, and my stepbrother, who did die just a few years ago, as a brother who died in the war. He was about 19. I don't have anybody like the sister.
Well, that's good. Oh no, maybe not. But what I was really thinking about was the father's profession. Is that a giveaway if we talk about it? If it is,
Is
we
it
won't.
the fathers or the grandfathers?
No, it's the grandfather, sorry.
No, by all means, you can talk about it.
No,
Because
you can.
we know it right from the beginning.
Right.
Her grandfather, to whom she's very, very close, used to be the head of MI6, which is military intelligence for overseas. But actually, its existence was never even acknowledged until 1995. And nobody knew who the staff were, so nobody, not even his wife did know, because she's a pretty sharp number, as Josephine. But she didn't let on that she knew. So it's a secret occupation. Like not knowing who M is, really. We know now, but only fairly recently. And the fact that it is not known is fairly key to the story. She discovers the hardest possible way.
So when John le Carré is writing, the circus, it's in part because they're in a building in London. It's Piccadilly Circus, right?
I don't know where
I
it
think
is.
so. But anyway, it's called the circus, for the clandestine nature of the offices of the agency. But then they built that enormous building on the Thames, which you can hardly miss, So I think that the secrecy part kind of got blown. I can't remember if the building's for MI5 or MI6 or both together.
I don't know either.
But you've seen it, haven't you? That
Yeah,
does
faces
anybody
on the
remember
tent.
which branch it is? Is it both or is it
I
just
think
one?
it's just MI5.
Do you?
But that's like based on a vague memory of a TV interview with John le Carré, where he was talking about
Yeah.
it.
Patrick
the building
has,
specifically.
Patrick has his phone, so he can probably set us straight, right? But and just for those of you not familiar with it, MI5 is basically the FBI. It's the internal, and MI6 is like the CIA and is the external arm of it. But it was all very hush hush, as you
Yes.
say.
Well,
MI5.
how it relates to me is because I made Lucas, the grandfather, I based him very much on my father, who was actually scientific advisor to the Admiralty in the Air Ministry. He wasn't in the military intelligence, but a lot of what he did, he could never speak to anyone about.
Well, the Official Secrets Act was taken really seriously by people in Britain. So, I'm sorry, Patrick, did you discover it?
He worked for both. The Security Service is MI5, and Secret Intelligence Service MI16 or M16. Is that what you meant?
No, I
MI6?
meant the buildings. Is the building housing just MI5?
Let's see.
I love Google. It's so handy. I don't have to know anything. I can just throw it out there, download it. Like Nadine, I have these kind of hazy memories from somewhat imperfect sources about what they all are. There's a woman who retired as head of, which was she? MI5? Stella Remington. Was she MI6 or 5? Do you remember?
I think he was 5, but I don't know.
I think so too. And she wrote, although I'm not entirely clear that she wrote them, it may have been ghostwritten. It's hard to know. But anyway, and in one of her early books, she pointed out that the worst kind of threat in every country was the internal, the domestic terrorist, which we have certainly found out, to our sorrow, is the case in this country. So it's kind of hard for MI5 and MI6 now to be so separate, because there's a lot of,
Must be a lot of crossover.
yeah, a lot of crossover, which I think is true here in our government agencies as well, although at the moment it's difficult to know what they can do or who's doing what.
Actually, we don't know any more than we do.
Possibly less. It's really scary. Right. But anyway, so she has a grandfather who has this history. So at some point it becomes relevant to her life, but we probably shouldn't talk too much more about that.
Don't say when.
Okay, won't do that. So tell us about her. I mean, give us, what's her name and, how old is she and all those good stuff.
Elena, and she is 28, I think, or 27.
You should know.
I know I should know, but there's other things I should know that I don't. I think, well, I've just finished the second one. I think she's 28 in that. I think she was 27 in the first.
Okay.
She was a bright girl, a lot of the hopes of the family. There were 2 sisters and a brother. The brother died in the war, so they're just 2 sisters. And the elder sister, Margot, is a widow. She was a single woman, married woman, and a widow all in the space of about 8 days. Well, we lost an awful lot of men. Elena was expected to have the good career, and she went to university and studied modern history, languages and so forth, and she was very good because of her father being an ambassador in several different European countries, which is how she comes to speak several languages well. She fell in love with somebody totally unsuitable, who turned out to be a traitor, apparently, and left her as well, and she lost her job because she believed in him and obeyed accordingly. So she takes up photography. She's very good at it, but she has lost her main career, and she still hurts over this bloke. I've cured her now. Not in
Right.
Cured her in that next book. But she has a good eye for photography, and it helps to get her all over the place, but it's not her first love yet.
Well, you know, it's interesting because the 30s and the war Second World War were really a hot time for women photographers.
Yes,
When
they
you
were.
think about, there have been, since World War II is like the gift that never stops giving to writers currently, and I don't mean that facetiously, but I mean it in the sense that there are so many aspects to that war and so many locations that there's absolutely no end to the stories that come out, but certainly some of them, Martha Gellhorn was one.
Margaret
Burke White, right. Hemingway seems to have married more than one of these photographers, but it was a big time for women in this profession.
And German women too.
Really?
Oh yes, some of the most famous were, yes.
Leni Riefenstahl, right.
And even Eva Braun, apparently. That's not what she's known for, but she was good.
It probably died with her in the bunker.
Yes.
If she died in the bunker, who knows,
Well,
right?
yes, yes. She's probably gone now.
Regardless, yes.
But it is a good time for photography, and it enables her to get all sorts of places and meet all sorts of interesting people.
You bet. I mean, how many of you remember Life magazine? Remember all that fabulous? Yeah, I mean, World War II for a lot of people was almost entirely represented by Life magazine. My mother, her generation, that's where they didn't have film clips and live coverage and all the rest of it.
Now we can see it happening. And yet it's in a way it's less real.
Yes.
I think the photographs were really heartbreaking and arresting, and in some places kind of triumphant. The sailors raising the flag on Iwo Jima, whether that was staged or not. What an iconic photograph, and
I think we've got a different set of icons.
Mm-hmm.
very true.
The thing that really gets me is a picture of a cloud of smoke on just the top of St. Paul's coming out of when London was bombed, because I was there.
Oh.
The Blitz is what I remember most.
Right. I remember being in Milan, and there's some photos around the cathedral. The Milanese strategy for preserving their beautiful Gothic cathedral was to light it. They brought every light they could, and they lit it up just really lit it up, and you couldn't miss it. And their hope was that as a result, nobody would actually drop a bomb on it, and nobody did. So there were all kinds of different strategies for hoping. I mean, Coventry was destroyed, by that run.
Yes, but I don't think anybody bombed St. Paul's or Westminster Abbey. They did bomb
No.
Buckingham Palace, apparently.
Yes, but
Queen's
no,
Inn.
the Abbey survived, right? And also Canterbury survived, which would have been in many ways would have been a terrible loss because so much history is tied up in Canterbury.
Yes, Thomas à Becket murdered on his own altar.
And the Black Prince, his armor is hanging up there and all that,
Yeah.
so, I mean, any kid, know how we all feel about Notre Dame, right? I mean, what a really
Yes.
personal loss that is, and no matter what they do, they can't ever restore it to how it was. The oak trees are, centuries, millennia old by now.
Yes.
There's no way to put them back.
Besides, even if you could, we know it's not the real one, so to speak.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
No, it would never be. And actually, now that this has happened, they'll probably do something that they will think is more permanent if the whole building doesn't fall down. The big
Yes.
danger, as I understand it, is the stone got so wet that they're not sure how the limestone is going to dry out and whether it will hold up. So there's a lot of variables in this
Yes.
that
I thought
nobody
about
knows
it,
anything
yes.
about.
Because some stones absorb moisture and some don't.
Right. But the war did destroy an awful lot.
Yes. Rubble in practically every street.
Yep.
Yes.
And whole villages or cities and so forth. But anyway, we're not there yet in this book. We are on a train.
I've got a lot to do before we get there. I started in 33 for
A long run.
yes, a long run. And a lot of things happened, and historically, what happened within the nations that were affected, particularly Germany, is the most interesting thing to me. What makes a civilized people cling on to this ideology with its appalling violence of every sort? And yet they still believed. I mean, why? Why do people believe something that obviously isn't true? There's some mechanism within us that will believe what we want to believe rather than what we see.
Well, it was a very badly structured peace treaty after the First World War.
Yes.
And, it was hard to recover from the,
I think it was. I think
excuse
it's
me, the
fault.
inequities that, and their economy went completely south.
There are quite a lot of people who say it was really just one war with a hiatus in the middle.
It's an interesting way to look at it. And not
Because the end of the first one and the second one almost inevitable.
yeah. And actually creates the Middle East problems that we have today. I mean, they flow right out of it as well. Gertrude Bell, a woman who rode camels around the desert, was the only real person that they had to consult about how to redraw the lines in Iraq and so forth. I find it totally fascinating that
Well, some of them are artificial countries, aren't they?
Yeah.
don't follow
No, they
the
are.
boundaries at all.
there's always that kind of amateur element in British Empire or British whatever.
Yes.
I find completely fascinating, largely because there were so many younger sons and people, that have money but no actual thing to do. And so they got interested in it. But time after time, you read, scientists and all that, they were all like amateurs they were all like Thomas Jefferson, this wonderfully educated man who developed all these hobbies, but he wasn't an actual professional in them.
Yes, he must have English in him somewhere, I think. And we do eccentrics rather well too.
Absolutely.
My favourite eccentric, well, I've got 2 or 3, but one of them is Ord Wingate. He learned his military tactics from the Bible, and he actually was the one who taught Moshe Dayan most of what he knew. But he was never defeated in battle, but his most famous exploit was to lead the Chindits in Burma, in the jungle.
Right.
And he used to lecture them wearing a bath hat and a string of garlic around his neck, and that's all. And they listened to him and they would have followed him anywhere.
For various reasons. That's fascinating.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There's just something, in the British character that rises. You read the whole history of the British East India Company. It's absolutely amazing. They created, conquered India, governed it, created this enormous empire. And it was only in 1857 that the government, after the Sepoy Rebellion, thought, maybe this should become a government project and not,
still using the railroads.
a company of merchants trading in the East or whatever it was.
They're still using the railroads that we laid down in India.
In India, but you know what? In Burma, they tore them up. They made a serious error.
Oh yes, that was a bad mistake.
It was the countries that kept the infrastructure that the British or the French laid down have done all right, and the ones that ripped it all up and said no have had a really hard time because they didn't have the expertise, to recreate it. We went to Burma. I was on the first trip you could take down the Irrawaddy. And this little funny wooden boat, and it kept getting stuck on sandbars because Irrawaddy's got a depth of like this. So, you have to take reading supplies, and they would tie you to a tree on the bank, and then they'd send for a tug. And it would steam down from Mandalay, and it would pull you off the sandbar. And at one point, They couldn't do that unless everybody got off the boat. So they had these planks, and I kid you not, were maybe this wide, and they laid them out. So we all walked the plank. It was our pirate experience. And any of us had pitched into the drink because the water in the Irrawaddy would probably be fatal for any of us if you swallowed it. You know, it'd be absolutely ghastly. So
Well,
I
that's
still
the-
remember teetering on this boat, which they laid across the rail of the boat to another boat and then to land. So I mean, it was like you in the water, right?
Well, the Thames poisoned as many people as it drowned.
It did. No, it's really, really true.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that Burma had let the entire railroad system collapse. They had let most of the banking system, they had let virtually everything collapse. And they're having a hard time putting it back together.
Yes, no matter how much they dislike you, but the people who conquered you do keep what's. We must have disliked the Romans very much at the time.
Right.
Well, 55 BC, Caesar landed.
But you still have the roads.
We still have the roads, and we still have the law, and we still have quite a lot of language.
You know, I've told everybody this. I just signed up, and it cost me no end of trouble because I paid for it over Google, which ruined all my passwords. I'm just so mad. But anyway, I signed up on Duolingo to learn Latin
Good for you.
because I missed it. I did French, Spanish, German, and Russian. I could do all of those. Never, and Italian. Never learned Latin. And I thought, that's my challenge. This is my senior challenge. I'm going to learn Latin.
Jolly good for you, and I think you'd enjoy
And
it.
it's really interesting.
It's the ultimate logic, and one of the reasons for teaching it in British schools is not only that much of our language is based on it, but it teaches you logic and
And structure, sentence structure.
Yes, and grammar.
Yep.
And I still go through nominative, vocative, dative, genitive, dative, ablative, and I missed one. But
You
well,
sent me a series of love notes in our recent email where you actually went through all that. Do you remember that? Ama, whatever. Yes, you did. Love it. So she was just showing off, but still, it was fun. But anyway, yeah, I think
it is. I mean, the reason that people still teach it in English schools quite a lot is not only because it's the root of our tongue, but it's so good logic. It teaches you to think in order.
very complicated. I've been envious of my husband for the entire 30 years we've been married because he had to learn classical Greek in college. It was a requirement at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, and Santa Fe. He can actually read the Odyssey in the original.
Oh.
I would kill to do that, but I'm not sure I have enough mental energy to do that at this stage.
There are very few people who can do that, I should think.
Yes. Well, anyway, back to Elena. She's on the train.
Who
and,
speaks German and French,
Yeah, you
Spanish,
mentioned that.
Italian, and English.
and how about Latin?
I haven't reached that yet.
Well, so she's on the train and she actually meets somebody.
Well, she met him in Amalfi, and the only reason I said it in Amalfi is I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and any excuse to get there is good.
Okay.
She meets him and she's sort of well on the way to falling in love with him. Do you want me to say what happens?
How much spoiler do you all want? It's not a huge spoiler.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, she
Cover your ears.
We won't remember any of that.
I know, we
Remember.
won't remember.
Yeah.
well, they part. I think she goes to the ladies' meet. He goes to fetch a cup of tea. When he doesn't return, she goes looking for him and finds him almost dead on one of the carriage floors. He's been stabbed, and he says to her, "I'm MI6. I'm on my way to Berlin to stop an assassination. You'll have to take the message and go for me."
Oh.
And she thinks, well, why would you want to stop the assassination of one of Hitler's worst henchmen? Because the British will be blamed for it.
Don't say anymore. No. Anyway, it's an interesting premise, right? Really gets your attention. 1933 at a book a year, you won't even make, well, you'll just barely make it to the war in 6 books.
I've got 2 in 33, and I planned 2 in 34, 2 in 35, and 2 in 36. I won't make it as far as the war. I'm going to end up with the education.
Ooh, yet another
Oh,
abdication thing.
And
I'm with
there-
Winston
there was-
Churchill on the abdication, his later view, not his early view.
Yes, but I won't tell you what I've
You
got
don't know
planned
what
for
he's
Elena,
feeling.
but believe me, she's going to find it tough.
Winston Churchill, who supported Edward and thought that he should be able to marry Mrs. Simpson, after the war said that the British people should raise a cross in every marketplace to Mrs. Simpson for keeping Edward off the throne.
Some people have said,
Churchill was not afraid to be inconsistent. You know, I mean, he was okay making a whole
but,
switch.
Several people have said if Mrs. Simpson hadn't existed, we'd have to have invented her.
He would have been the wrong king for the time, that's for sure.
Wrong king for most times, I'm afraid.
Well, but specifically that time,
Yes.
yeah, because his sympathies were so much aligned.
Well,
It would have been
something
very
which
difficult.
I was reading about for future reference. His grandmother was his grandfather, was a great grandfather, was pure German, and Victoria is descended from the German House of Hanover, and then his mother, Queen Mary, well, she wasn't Mary,
Princess of Teck,
Princess of Teck was pure German, yes.
right,
So there's far more German blood than anything else.
absolutely.
And he
It's all the fault of the Stuarts. It goes, I'm serious, it goes all the way back to 1715, when the Stuarts did not keep their dynastic, and they also were
Yes.
Catholic, which everybody hated, but they didn't keep up a,
James wasn't Catholic. He was brought up strictly Protestant by his uncle. He wasn't brought up by Mary. But Mary.
but after that,
Yes. Yeah,
I've always blamed Charles II. This is the man who littered England with bastards. I mean, he had, I don't even know how many, and he stayed married to a sterile woman forever, you know,
Yes,
and,
but he stepped around a bit.
but he didn't produce a legitimate heir, is my point, and I think he really failed his dynasty. I mean, part of the job of a monarch was to produce another monarch, and
Well,
he
he certainly
didn't do
tried.
that.
Yeah.
No, he didn't, because he didn't do any of it in wedlock, and, you know, it didn't work out.
We don't know what was. No, and when it went to his brother, he was a big clown. But he.
That's my point, and he knew it.
Yes.
Charles knew that his brother
He
was,
didn't last very long. He produced two daughters, both of whom reigned.
and they
He didn't
unfortunately
produce
didn't have any
children
children either.
Well, Anne had
At
17.
18, wasn't it 18, and one of them lived for a little while?
None of them lived to adults.
Yeah, and he had a whatever hydrocephaly is, but she obviously had a terrible blood problem with her husband, and so they all died. But anyway, that's where the Germans came from, because when she died without children, they had to go all the way back to Germany
Yes.
and brought over the Hanoverians, and then you're right, it was a German monarchy. It still is.
Georges and things. Yes.
Still is, right, right.
Well, we've sort of taught him a bit since then. Victoria was reasonably successful.
And they changed their
Certainly
names too.
produces-
You know, the Mountbattens had a German name, and they changed it to Battenberg, right? And the Windsors was the house of Saxe-Coburg, right?
Yep.
So they actually, in the First War, if I remember right, many of them changed their names from a German name to a more British name. So
Very good move.
it was a good move. Even before social media, it was an excellent move, right?
Well, gossip moves almost as fast as social media. Not over quite such a distance, but
So, since we're not seeing them, catch us up on Charlotte and Thomas. I like to think they're just out there somewhere doing things.
oh well, Daniel brings them into each story just a little bit. Yes, Thomas is still prospering as head of whatever he was.
Special branch.
Thank you. And Charlotte's going over gracefully. And they will
And
be.
what about Emily and Charlotte's mom?
I
And
haven't mentioned them. And Vespasia's gone, of course, because you know you can't live forever. I gave her a
Why
nice
not?
shot. It was a shame.
you could have given her at least 97. I mean, if you're going to make it, she could have made it.
I haven't made it yet.
No. Still.
But well, she must have been pushing that when she went. I didn't say when she went or how.
No, you didn't, and I'm grateful for that.
Right. No, I have people who say, well, she ought to come in with Daniel. I think, goodness, she'd be 100 and something. We don't want to see her, falling to bits. But
Okay.
I can always go back and bring them in Christmas, November, and I think I have done I think that's what this year's one's about.
You gave Vespedia her own Christmas novella, which was
Oh,
really
series.
nice.
Another one.
Speaking of which, Anna's agreed to sign the Christmas novella, except instead of here, I'm going to send them to her, but we'll have signed copies of them.
Oh, great.
And it usually publishes on the first Tuesday in November, so roughly the 5th of November, we'll have the Christmas story for you, which will be really nice.
Yes, well, I gave it to her and set it back a bit.
Nice.
I mean, you know, you don't have to progress. You do have to progress more a bit at a time with the main stories. But a Christmas novella can go back anytime you want.
So what's going on with William and Hester while all this is going on? They seem to be on vacation as well.
They are. They are on vacation.
I've made a strong pitch to have them come back in something because I really like the monks.
The Christmas novella for next year, which I'm working on at the moment, Monk has a Here and Gone Again. It's about Hooper and Celia, that he married.
Right.
But I can always bring Monk back sometime, give him a Christmas novella, or anybody else up.
Or after you write 6 more books, you can always give him a book of his own, right? So I'm sticking with 97. I figure you've got time to write these 6 and then some more.
Yes.
Right, so we've kind of caught up with everybody. So how about questions? You all have questions you would like to ask him?
I do. I'm lucky enough that I've already read the book. When it very first published.
Because you're a librarian.
And I'm not going to say anything to give it away, but I was fascinated by her grandmother. Does her grandmother figure in the future books?
Oh, she will do. She doesn't. I don't think she does much in this one.
No, but at the
But
end
yes.
you realise what she's like. Vespedia. She's like
Yes.
she's the Vespedia of this series. She's what the get it done attitude that.
Yes. She has a pretty. They must be related somewhere or another.
Yeah.
Yes, Josephine.
Yeah. But,
I'm very fond of Josephine. I'm very fond of all of them. I'm
Mhm.
very, very fond of Lucas because he's based on my
Oh, yeah.
father. And I promise you, nothing will ever happen to the dog.
oh, good.
In fact, I got a T-shirt which was given to me, which says, it was good little terrier looking at a, I think it's got the picture of the film. It says, I don't care who gets killed as long as the dog lives. Don't kill animals in my stories.
Anyone else? Come on.
Well, I don't want to hog the. But one more question, because I'm rereading all the pits. I've gone back to
That's
the
a
beginning
massive
and I'm starting all
undertaking.
over again. When I opened this book and I read it, I was struck by the difference in the use of language.
Oh,
In the sense that the Victorians spoke differently. They were more formal. They didn't contract.
yes.
And it comes across in the book that this is so much more, in many ways, modern language
Well, it is.
than the wonderful language of the pits, which is so beautifully set in its Victorian ways. And
It's subconscious, I think, but thank you.
yeah, I would never have noticed it probably if you hadn't written a modern book.
Yes.
That the pits, the use of language is very much of its day, and especially
Thank you.
when you have your lower class people talking. I don't know, Gav, what went on, but you know,
Yes.
and it's written that way in the text.
Well, you've got to make a difference between one person's vocabulary and another, as well as their pronunciation. But, yeah, thank you. I have to watch it and do it consciously now.
Actually, I think Anne's done that really well. Do you remember the monk book with the Hungarians? You know, and I thought when the Hungarians spoke, they spoke differently than the British spoke. I don't know that your Hungarian's all that great, but no, I know it isn't. Mine isn't either, but it's a tough language. But I thought you did very well differentiating the voice. Remember, it read differently than
Well, thank
British
you.
people.
I can't even remember whether I tried or whether it just sort of happened. Sometimes you get lucky. I don't want a person to sound as if they're out of their place, you know, because unless they're trying to particularly, but I'll keep an eye and see if I can continue to do it.
Excellent. How about over here? I've got my back to you, so I apologize. Hello, no questions over here? What's wrong with you people?
No.
We need more cake. Yes, sir.
After living with these characters for decades, and then they go dormant, and how do you feel about that as a
I'm so excited about the new ones. I've wanted to do the Elena for about 7 years, 8 years. Because although I love the pits and the monks, I need to change of direction. I need to do something that's new and say something that's more relevant to today. And I wish it weren't relevant. It's now more relevant than it was when I planned it. A lot more.
What year did you write your very first book?
It must be about 41 years ago because August was my 40th anniversary of being published.
Wow.
So that the first one that was published, not the first book by any means.
Is that Decatur Street Hangman?
Yes.
Right. Well, let's see. I started the store 30 years ago, and I'm trying to remember how many of your books already existed.
It would be 10
Yeah,
because that was about the year I started the monks.
sounds about right. We've been doing this for 30 years together, but I knew there was a tail on the front of it that obviously I missed. But I remember reading Decatur Street Hangman. Isn't it great to read a new author, a new voice for the first time? You know, it's really, that book stays with you, I think, more than anything else. That first time you run into that voice. I remember I just loved Decatur Street Hangman. And I was hoping it wouldn't be the end of it, so I was cheered. I would have been harder to have read it before you published a second book, you know, because then you would have been nervous thinking there wasn't another. I would have been nervous. Yes. Yeah.
But fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I just went on because I was so buoyed up by at last getting something accepted. I wanted to write the second one before.
So do you have a number of magazines, quote, in a drawer?
Pardon?
Do you have a number of magazines manuscripts that did not get published?
No, I haven't kept them. But there were,
You haven't
there were,
kept them.
No.
Very smart.
I've got one which I hope to rewrite one of these days. And I'm not sure I could lay my hands on that, but
Yeah, this is long before computers and other stuff, right?
yes.
I often hear authors saying, you know, have a book, but it'll never be published. It's just in a drawer. And I think if you really don't want it to ever be published, you should burn it. Because somebody will find it. Think of Harper Lee. You know, I mean, seriously, you know, if you don't want something to come to light as an author, I'm speaking to you back there, Karen, you know, burn it or do something so they can't sneak it out on you.
I don't think I've actually still got that one, but the idea is with me. Maybe it's the Spanish Inquisition,
Ooh.
and I wrote it during, I think I was here when I wrote it, or shortly after I went back to Britain, because we all have the idea that the whole world should have democracy whether it wants it or not, because it's good for you. The Spanish Inquisition thought you should all be Catholic whether you want to or not, because it's good for you. And the idea that you have the right to tell somebody else what they should believe and force them into it if you have to, and kill them if they really won't. It's very strong. We all think we know better than everybody else does if they think differently from us. And my hero was an inquisitor who came to realize that the one thing God gave everybody was the choice to believe as they liked. And when he said that, of course, at the crossroads, he was the next one to be burned. And he knew that he would be. But he had to say what he believed was the truth. That you have the right to believe as you choose.
The book's strangely relevant at the moment.
Yes, I'm afraid.
I saw a hand over here. Yes, ma'am.
You know, when I start a good book, I go about things, but it's always in my mind. What's going to happen? Where are they going to go? You know, and I wonder how in the world can an author go about with all these ideas in their head?
Like
and all
me,
these
they forget what they're doing.
characters.
What they come into this room for? No. Have I had lunch or not?
And how do you tell them, quiet down, everybody? You know, I need to rest, or I need to do this, or something. How do you?
I don't know. I'm still looking. But I particularly there are certain storylines that stay with me. How do I get this person to help me do that and sound reasonable and realistic? Because you don't believe a story, nobody does, when you don't know why people want something or other. Everything's got to matter, or people don't go to extreme lengths for something, or they have to think it means something. But no, I don't really know how to turn off.
Authors have lots of imaginary friends. It's like Harvey's everywhere. I'm trying to think, who was the couple? An author was here with his wife recently, and it came up that he's always got these hits. She said to me afterward, the two of us have never had dinner alone. Which I thought was a really poignant statement, you know, but also true, you know. That, gosh, I wish I could have found this. Doesn't matter who it was, but anyway, I thought it was such an interesting statement. And
So interesting that you should say so.
yeah, well, she seemed okay with it, you know. I mean, it was sort of a joke. She wasn't being bitter. It wasn't that kind of a comment, you know. But I thought, I mean, authors are never really lonely because you've always got this whole group of playmates, you know, out there. But your question is, how do you keep track of them and how do you know where they're going, which is a different question, really.
By the seat of my pants, I'm afraid I don't make the sort of notes I should make.
But don't you think out your plot ahead of time, at least the
yes.
rough outlines?
Oh, yeah, very detailed. My
okay.
editor insists and my agent insists.
Oh, you have to turn them in order to get paid?
No, before they contract.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But it's only the quarter you get paid ahead of time.
No, all I meant was that
They
in
won't
order for them to want to offer you money, you have to give them some clue.
Some idea, a
Right.
paragraph or two. And Don said to me, you know, just write out the main ideas and plots and so forth of the next 6 dilemmas. I'll write it by next Tuesday, you know.
Oh.
They're beast agents, aren't they? Slave drivers, right? Anybody found a question? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was just wondering how you did that one kind of standalone novel, that Sheen on the Silk, and have you ever thought about, or was that just a departure for you, or?
It was a complete departure for me, and there really couldn't be a sequel to that.
I mean, have you thought about do ideas like that come to you, or do you obviously love this kind of keep the same character going?
I don't really know. I can't remember why I wrote that, except that I wanted to explore the question of how much are you prepared to do in the name of a Christian religion against people who would take it from you, and how far do you transgress the laws of the religion? I mean, Christ didn't ever say go out and kill everybody who thinks differently, and yet we seem to have done it regularly. I mean, if you're going to be honest about it, God never, I believe, told anybody to go out and kill those who differ with you, or persecute them or treat them badly in any way. How far are we prepared to fight in order to keep our own right to believe as we wish? And what do you lose and sacrifice that you perhaps can never get back if you commit certain violence against others? But yet, so many religions whose teaching is actually quite pacific, and I mean as in peace, will do appalling things to people who think differently. Then I think it's a difficult question. We don't ask ourselves often enough.
Well,
because
religion can be a power base too, don't forget. I mean,
oh yes,
you know,
it
the
is.
Inquisition was protecting itself.
Of course.
And
We do it again and again and again, but how honest is it to the teachings of Christ?
I wasn't thinking just about Christians. I was thinking about, you know, what's going on with Islam at the moment, and did,
Yes.
you know, a millennium, well, back in 795 or whenever it was, and you know, I think many religions have.
Oh, it applies to most of them, if not all.
Right. I don't think
Right.
Christians have behaved any better, but
No, they haven't. But only Christianity, there's teachings I really know. And I picked that because the whole argument supposedly was on whether the Holy Spirit proceeded forth from the Father only or from the Father and the Son. I mean,
Well, but there's the whole, if you really want to get into this, the transubstantiation argument is the one I've always had trouble with, which is,
Me too.
does the bread and the water actually change into the body and the blood of Christ, or is it merely representative? And whole wars were fought over that, you know, so it's hard to, I mean, there's a whole split between the Sunni and the Shiites, which has some very small, you know,
Yes.
in theory, significance, but it's so bitter.
And yet, I mean, Islam teaches he who offends one man offends humanity, and he who helps one man helps humanity. It doesn't very well go in with burning people because they think differently about something.
Well, that's true. And then Israel is riven by divisions, you know, so I mean, I think it's true, you know, it's a general,
Well, it was meant to be. I just picked on that instance because it was such a bitter, destructive war, and it was very exciting times.
it
Full of
was,
ideas.
wasn't it?
Yes.
You want to be Harriet the Spy. I could just see you. More fun to write about it, make it up.
Yes, oh yes, you can put
Right.
it down at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm
Good.
wondering,
Yes, Sabrina.
in the previously, there was some hopes that you would have, like, you personally, that there would be a, movie treatment or a, video treatment of one of, or either of your series. The
Well
Pits
on
or
the way.
Monks. Can you tell us?
Really?
Really?
The monks, I haven't signed the contract yet, but I hope to within a week or two. And the Pits, they've got some scripts.
So it would be something similar to like how, I'll use Outlander for example, like Through Stars or something like that?
I haven't seen that, so I don't know. I don't know what the one will be. I just know I've seen the first script and I agree with the things that they said in the rewrite.
That's exciting, isn't it? Yay.
And that's all happened within the last 3 or 4 months for both Pits and Monks.
So you won't even have to live to be 97 to see it, if it all works out.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. I mean, seriously, it's nice, you know, to think that this
It's
may
not-
all happen.
It's happened since I came to America.
Right.
In fact, it's happened this year. It's been a terrific year. I bought a condo and I'm on the road with both Pits and Monks.
Well, I toast to that. I'm going to say goodbye to our video audience and thank you very much for joining us. I
Thank
did replenish the